Mr. Hafey, how are you?
I'm doing great, Troy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So how long have you lived in the Grand Valley?
Uh, Now it's been about 22 years, although I went to several colleges, but one of them was Mesa for a while. And so
Okay.
I grew up on the western slope of Colorado up in Craig.
You grew up in
Originally.
Craig?
I grew up in Craig, yeah.
Oh, I
It's
had no
freezing,
idea.
frozen tundra. We always thought Grand Junction was like the banana belt. So wanted to be here and eventually ended up here. So it's
Cool.
great. 22 years here.
Nice. So you said you went to Mesa for just a spell, or did you graduate? Or
I actually graduated from there with a bachelor's in business. And so
Okay.
that's part of my background. I didn't go through the regular educational process to become a teacher or principal. I went through a business background.
what were you aspiring to do at that point?
Well, at that time I wanted to be a human resource director.
Okay.
And long story short, I'll tell the story, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
So all the way through high school, I always thought I want to be in business because that's where you can make money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would, everything was projecting towards that. I was going to go into college and get a business degree. But weird things kept happening. I kept going to or being invited into classrooms to talk to teachers or talk to kids and help out with kids. And every time I'd go into, even in high school as an athlete or a storyteller, the teachers would be like, wow, you're going to make a great teacher. And I would be like, no, you don't understand. I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm going to go into business. And they'd be like, right, sure you are. And then, so I went to college, and my college coach noticed it right away when we'd do camps with kids and things like that. And he said, hey man, you ought to work with kids, And I'm like, yeah, I'm going into business, coach, And then he would send me out though to elementary schools, and I would talk to kids about, things like staying off drugs and trying hard, never giving up. And boy, every single time it was like these teachers were like prophetic. They would just be like, you're going to be a great teacher. And I'd be like, no, I'm not. I'd even get angry at him sometimes. I'd be like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
I am not going to be a teacher. And so they would be like, right. And so I ended up going off and getting my MBA. Actually, I had my MBA and started working for Target stores. And that was a great.
Where was that at?
That was actually in Colorado Springs. I
Okay.
was living in Colorado Springs at the time, and it was a great opportunity. I had moving up the corporate ladder, and things were going great. I was actually at one point, I was opening up a lot of the super targets across the Western United States and stuff. I'd be flying around and helping them hire their executives and their folks, and it was great. It was a great lifestyle. Other than like you never get Christmas off, things like that,
Right.
So the retail business is hard in that way. But it was funny how many opportunities kept coming my way to be in schools. It was the weirdest thing, even with Target. And they even had me teach junior achievement, which was a really fun opportunity. They teach business principles to kids. And so they said, yeah, we need you. You're good with kids. You go do that. So I remember going into this middle school, and it was a really rough middle school. To tell you how rough, and I'm not exaggerating, I actually had applications for the kids to fill out one day to teach them how to fill out an application. We get to the part where it says, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And I had like half the class raise their hand.
In middle school?
In middle school.
Whoa.
And they didn't know what a felony exactly was, but they knew they'd been in bad trouble. And I'm like, hey, Johnny, why is your hand up? I mean, it was shocking to me. And the kid goes, okay, so I stole the policeman's car and I wrecked it into a pole. Do I have to write that down here? I was like, what? Johnny, you stole a policeman's car. Why did you steal a policeman's car? He goes, well, the door was open and it was on. And I don't know, I just thought it was fun. And
Oh my
I'm like,
gosh.
and then a few other stories from kids. And I was like, wait a minute, you guys, this is crazy. I said, hold on. I said, if you guys, listen, here's what I do with those applications. I have 100 applications. I put that on the bottom of the pile. I said, I look through all the other ones first before I'll look at one that has a felony on it, because I got to have somebody I can trust. And they were like, oh. And so then I said, all right, well, let's put it, let's think about it this way. If you don't have any other problems from this point, if you get in trouble with the law from this point, probably the judge is going to say, all right, we'll expunge that, or we'll put that away so you don't have to worry about it. But that means you got to stop now, though, guys. And they were like, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Holy smokes.
but in that point, though, I would leave even with, and Target would send other executives and things with me, and they would walk out of the room every time, and they'd be like, Corey, man, you're good with kids. You ever thought about working with kids? And I'd be like, no, man, I'm moving up the corporate ladder. This is great. I love what I'm doing.
Right.
And it just was going along like that, and having a good salary and everything. And then one day my wife came home, and she looked at me, and we had never had a conversation about this, like really talked about going back to school and becoming a teacher or educator or anything like that. She just walked in one day and she said, I have a job opportunity offer in another state. She said, they have a college there where you can go back and get your teaching degree, which is what you really need to do. And I was like, oh my gosh, but this is like our job security. This was good salary.
How old were you at that time?
Gosh, I was probably in my mid-20s.
Already?
Yeah.
Gosh, man, you fast-tracked everything.
Things were going well. It was good. But she was like, we actually called it the $1 million decision at the time, because it was like, how are you going to, we'll never recoup that kind of pay.
Mm-hmm.
There was no way. But so I went to school in Nevada, Sierra Nevada College. It was a little up in Lake Tahoe. It was really a nice place. And started working with kids. And man, I have never looked back. It's been so much fun. Like this was what I tell people, like it was a drumbeat that was going on in me. And the closer I got to it, the louder that drumbeat got. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, you need to be a teacher. You need to be an educator. You need to be that. And so finally, I went back and got my teaching degree, and now we've never looked back the other way. And I can't imagine my life being different now. Like I love.
Can you imagine if you were in corporate America today?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no. Yeah, no. I remember, like it's such a different world, I remember working one time 36 straight hours of just trying to make things perfect, you know, and I was very competitive, and I really sports background, that kind of stuff. So I really wanted it to be, I really wanted to win. Mm-hmm. That sounds weird, but I wanted to win all the time. And well, where's the last dollar that you make? It makes you a winner. I don't know.
Yeah.
No one knows.
Right.
So, but I know that I'm winning now because I'm seeing kids grow, and that piece is what really fulfills me now. So that's kind of where I came from. And I got into teaching, and that was great. I remember my first teaching job was a little school in Sparks, Nevada, a suburb of Reno.
Okay.
And it was just phenomenal. I loved it. I was so naive, Troy. I would do the goofiest things because I just didn't know any better, and I had these big grandiose ideas and dreams and stuff, and I would, like couple days before Thanksgiving break, I would have all the families in my first grade class cook an entire Thanksgiving meal. Like they're going to do it in 2 days, but I didn't care. I'd do it again for our class.
Right.
They'd cook big turkeys and everything, and then we serviced some of the kids from a Paiute Indian reservation there. And so I would put on this big program as a teacher, and I would say, man, there's going to be, this is going to tell, I would do a comical story of the Pilgrims and the Indians and their feast. Mm-hmm. And so I just had a humorous kind of thing to do with it. But the Indian folks, I said, do you guys want to wear your Native American garb? Do you want to wear all your wonderful traditional clothing? And they said, and they were looking at me like I was crazy. Like, no one's ever asked us that. No one would allow us to do that even. And I'm like, well, would you? And they were like, we'd be honored to. They had all this wonderful stuff. So they brought all that stuff, and the kids were in their regalia, and they looked so beautiful. And I just remember having such a great time teaching first graders. And man, I knew, like, it was perfect affirmation that I knew what I made that choice to move into education, and it was just replenishing me in such a good way. I loved it. So
wow,
yeah. So that's where I started. I started over in Reno and Sparks area, and then after about 3 or 4 years, my wife and I had our first child, and all of our families were over here on the western slope of Colorado, and they said, you got to come back now. We didn't care if you guys left, but you got a grandkid now, so bring it over,
Yeah.
So we came back to Grand Junction, and it's been great.
So how long did you teach then?
Yeah.
How many years did you, so you came back here, so you taught here.
Yeah.
Where'd you teach?
Good question. So I came back and I started teaching at Taylor Elementary in Palisade,
Oh, okay.
which is a great community, a great place. And I loved it. I think, honestly, in a spiritual sense, I think God has always put me with people who were great leaders or somebody I could learn from.
Okay.
And one of those people was Dee Crane. She had been the principal, was the principal anyway, at Taylor Elementary for 36 straight years.
Wow.
I mean, amazing.
Okay.
And she had worked in our school district for, at the time, 44 years.
She'd been here a while.
Yeah. When she actually retired, she actually continued to volunteer at the school for another 8 to 10 years. Like, this lady spent 50 to 55 years of her life doing this. And she was just so rich, so full of ideas for me, and just motivation and just how to do things right. I loved her. She was amazing. So, and I'd had another great mentor back in Reno. That was another great lady who was a principal. And so there had been another drumbeat that kind of had started, though.
Okay.
They had started to say, gosh, there's leadership potential in you. You ought to think about being a principal someday. And I'm going to be a teacher. That's what I'm called to do. I'm going to be a teacher. They're like, well, a principal is a teacher. And I was like, okay, well, that's a different way to think about it. Okay, they could be. And they're like, but they're a teacher of 400 kids or 450 or whatever. And so I remember being out at Taylor Elementary. I taught there for about 4 years. So I've been teaching about 8 years or so. And we did this kind of a survey thing or a training thing to try to make our school better. And it was a Baldridge event kind of thing. Well, these folks are people who are from everything but education. They're business owners, they're entrepreneurs, they're people who have made it well. They have volunteered their time to go back into buildings like schools or other businesses, and they give you advice. They interview you like crazy, and then they give all this building advice about, like, here's what'll make you better, systems-wide. And so our school did that. We won this award, and but those people don't care about you. They're not tied to education. They'll just say it like it is. Like, if you're messing up, they're going to tell you you're messing up, and or just nothing's taboo for them. So,
like a Gordon Ramsay type of thing.
Yes,
coming in.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so I remember we're in this cafeteria, and they're giving their final spiel to the school, and our whole staff is in there, 50 people or so, and they have they're looking at Dee Crane. Now, she's at the end of her career, but nobody's going to ask Dee Crane. She's an icon. Nobody's going to ask her, when is your last year going to be? No one would dare ask her that. Mm-hmm. Not because she wasn't approachable, just because she was esteemed so much that it's impossible to think that.
Sure. Well, no, they probably didn't want to either, right?
No, right.
They don't want to go there because
exactly.
We're not going to plant that seed in her.
Exactly right. And so, but these guys, they gave this advice, and then they looked right at Dee Crane and they said, Dee, every great leader plans for a legacy, plans for how this will maintain. You have a great school. It's amazing. You guys have won the award and all this stuff. But how are you going to maintain this after you leave? You need to have a succession of leadership, someone else. How are you going to do that? And she looked across the room, looked right at me and said, I know exactly who is going to be the next leader here. Oh. And my eyes got big, and everybody in the room looked at me, and I'm like, what? We hadn't even really formally talked about this.
Yeah.
I mean, she had just handed me brochures every once in a while, just saying, you ought to think about, getting in the principalship and stuff, just randomly, not here, not, just. And so I just, that started, that was drumbeat getting louder. Mm-hmm. And so I went back. Mesa was just offering a leadership program, first year cohort of people that, mainly in the Valley and around the Western Slope, that wanted to be principals or in leadership. So I joined that up. Mesa did a great job with it. They brought in all these great speakers and people. And just being around the people in this group, I remember going home and telling my wife, I was like, honey, there's like 50 people here smarter than me. I'm like, this is really intimidating. And but it was, again, I could learn from them.
Yeah.
And, one of them happened to be a good friend of mine that turned out to be Mark Schmaltz, who was the principal, who ended up being the principal at Appleton. And so later on, when I had ascended from Dee Crane actually went and said this to the school district leadership. She said, hey, I'll look at retirement when you guys place him as the principal. And they said, Well, that never happens. The principal doesn't get to choose their person. She said, well, then I'll be here forever, And so,
Oh, wow.
but then they end up saying, okay, well, let's get him some more training. So they sent me out to 2 great experiences. I was assistant principal at Rimrock and Shelley at the same time. And Rimrock was great because it was the first year Rimrock had opened. It was a brand new school. And so I got to find out what it's like to build a staff right from the ground up. Tammy Kramer was the principal there, and she did a great job. Teresa Vandelshot was the principal at Shelley. She's now executive director of special education in our school district. Anyways, they both did a great job of giving me good experiences there. And after 1 year of that, I went back to Taylor, and Dee said, I'll retire, and he's ready. And so I became the principal there. And,
At Taylor?
At Taylor, yeah. And it was pretty cool. My first experience, I was so amped to do it. I'm so nervous, though. I'm like following an icon. I can't.
Big shoes.
I can't even fit into her shoes.
Right.
I mean, they're just ginormous. And she had a very wonderful staff. So wonderful. One of their first events, and they probably sensed that I was really worried about how they would respond to me. So they went and got on the very first day of my principalship. They went and they borrowed band instruments from, actually this is the second day, because the first day I gave this speech about how a band, and you'd appreciate this with your bands in your life and stuff like that, but you have to have all the instruments working together, and so I gave some speech about that and just kind of an illustration. Well, the next day, we're supposed to meet again for another session, and all of a sudden I hear down the hallway, I'm like so clueless. I don't even know where everybody, I'm like, where is everybody? I asked the secretary, I'm like, nobody's here. Did I not tell them the time? She goes, I don't know. And she acted really clueless. And then all of a sudden I heard this band, this cacophony of pounding and stuff coming down the hallway. And it was the whole staff came in. Everybody had borrowed an instrument from the high schools and different places, and they were pounding on these drums and horns, and they didn't know how to play half of them, and they're just coming in, and they did a whole routine. I'm like, how did they practice this without me knowing,
Well, in such a short amount of time.
Amount of time and everything. And they came in, and it was just, they said, we're reporting for duty, sir. We're the band. We're your band. Tell us what to do. And I look at that lesson, and I think back, that gave me so much confidence as a young principal. I would encourage, staffs out there, like, you can fill your principal too. It's just not, it's not just one way. And maybe that's even for every job, but you can fill your supervisor. You can make them better by how you perform, by what your recommendations are. And anyways, so they did a great job of welcoming me in. And so I was a principal there for about 4 years. And then my old buddy, Mark Schmaltz, said he was retiring from Appleton. And he said, hey man, you would like this community a lot. Well, along that way, I had been working at Monument Little League as a volunteer. I met all these Appleton families every day, and I was just like, man, these people are great people, and it's close from my home and all this stuff. And I really thought Taylor needed a transition year, and they needed to be able to move to another principal too, because they'd had, me, and I was young and didn't know what I didn't know.
How long was that then?
So about 4 years I was there. And
sorry about that.
No problem. I was there about 4 years, and then I applied for the Appleton job. And I remember I went through a whole interview process and everything. And I remember the executive director at the time his name was Andy Lossy. And Andy had been the former principal of Appleton 2 principals before he ascended to the director position. But when he gave it to me, I remember him holding out his hands like he had a trophy in him, and he held out his hands to me, and he said, Hafey, you get Appleton, like just totally reverent, like, you get Appleton. He goes, now don't screw it up, So I was like,
you're like, thanks.
Yeah, right. So I kept thinking, like, man, this school has just this great tradition, and it's the oldest consolidated school west of the Mississippi. First time that multiple communities had put money together, tax money together, to create a school. There have been lots of one-room schoolhouses that had been earlier, but this is the first time multiple communities put their money together to build a school west of the Mississippi. And so what was great, if I don't mind, I'm just going to jump into.
Keep going.
There was an event that we had the first year I was there, when I got elected principal there, the 100-year reunion of Appleton graduates. So Appleton had been a 1st through 12th grade school, and we sent out thousands of flyers to people all over the world just saying, hey, come back to Appleton for a reunion. So we had all these 70, 80, 90-year-old folks that came back who had graduated high school at Appleton School. And we had this big, I filled up a full gym with food and tables and things, and all these people were there. And man, that was so good for me because I'm the brand new principal coming in here, and to see how all these people had all these fond memories and how much that school had impacted them. They're in their 90s and they still thought about this school in such positive light. It had a major impact on their life. I thought, wow, this is a great story about how what we do is so important. Like, it really does have a ripple effect forever. So those people were awesome because they had so many good stories, Troy. They would find out I was the principal, and so then they would come up and tell me their dirt from when they were in high school or something, what we did to the principal or something back then. I'd be like, yeah, tell me the stories,
Yeah.
Sometimes the ladies there'd be like a group of 3 or 4 ladies, with their beautiful silver hair, and they'd look around and they'd be like, Mabel, remember when in this gym there, right over there was the archway for prom, and then this was the punch bowl over here. And these are people who, they lived through the 1940s and World War II. And when Appleton was shut down, like half the day on Fridays, just so the kids could go out and pick up scrap metal to throw into a train that sat near the school to help the war effort.
Holy smokes! Are you kidding me?
No, and they had multiple classmates who left school early to go fight, to go be patriots for our country. And I just thought, man, this is. They would talk about these kids that didn't come back, never got their degree or anything, and it was just powerful. And then there was the funny stories. They had. It kind of showed the different times that we're in. They. Gosh, I got several of them, but they had a bunch of girls back in the 40s who wanted to play basketball, but there was no girls basketball teams around. Mm-hmm. So they said, they went to the principal and they said, so we want to have a girls basketball team. They were like, well, there's nobody to play, so I guess we'll put you on the boys team, which at that time was just like over the top, crazy, so forward thinking. And it was just scandalous. It really was.
Sure.
And so they put him on the boys team. Well, the first week, this girl pulls down this rebound, throws her elbow back, breaks this boy's nose. And so it was traumatic. Like, they immediately kicked every girl off the school off the team and said, this is not ladylike. It was written about in the paper.
Holy smokes.
Oh man, it was a big deal. And so they kicked them all off because girls were too tough for the boys, And so they end up saying, Colburn High School the next year called down and said, hey, we'll put together a girls team if you'll reinstate your girls team just as a girls team.
Sure.
And so they had the girls play the girls then. But that's a fun story. Another story, I had three guys walk up to me and this one lady while I was there, and one of the guys says, oh, you're the principal? I said, yeah. He says, I think I'm going to tell you about a fight we had here. And I'm like, okay. And the wife flushes. She turns red, and she's like, no, do not tell him about the fight. And the other guys were like, yeah, tell him about the fight. I'm like, okay, all right, tell me about the fight. And this just shows you how times are so different. There's a high school, and at the high school level, this kid was a junior in high school. He's on an Appleton football team they had at the time. They were actually the mascots. They had the Centaurs.
Okay.
They were the Centaurs, and then they transitioned to the Roadrunners, and now we're the Bookworms. But anyways, they said, yeah, tell him about the fight. So he says, I'm a junior in high school. I'm on the football team. I beat out one of my teacher's kids for this tight end position. He said, I beat him out for the position. The kid ends up, or the dad is really angry at me. Like, you're not as good as my kid, all this stuff. Every day in class, he's telling this kid, you're no good. You missed your block. I saw you didn't catch that pass, whatever. And the kid's just like, he graded on me. He goes, so I finally started being disrespectful back to my teacher. He goes, that was a big deal back then,
Oh, yeah.
He started saying, well, your kid's not that good. And, I beat him out fair and square and just talking back. And he says, finally, the guy hands him a paper and says, you didn't do very good. And he says, yeah, well, I'm definitely better than your kid. And this guy says, you know what? You want to make something of it? And so the teacher invites the kid to go outside and have a fight. And so But the whole school knew that this was coming. So the whole school leaves. The entire school goes out into the parking lot. And they make this big, ginormous ring of, hundreds of kids. And all the teachers are there and the principal and everybody's standing there watching this. And this guy performs his fight for me in front of me, thinking back 40 years, or 80 years. And he's like, so I'm giving him the business. He goes, I knocked down the teacher. And he goes, but it's Marcus of Queensbury rules, so I let him back up. And then I'm giving him the business. He goes, I knock him down again. He said, so the guy gets up and he's had enough. He goes, so the teacher runs through the crowd, gets on his motorbike. But he says, but I'm mad. He goes, I'm still mad at this guy. And so I look around and this motorbike's trying to weave its way through all the people going about 5 miles an hour. And he goes, I grab a rake that's sitting there, the gardener left, and I stick it in his spokes. Oh. And he goes, the bike goes over, flips over. And he goes, what was funny was, he goes, I never got in trouble. The principal walked over, picked up the teacher, said, hey, Mr. Smith, I'll take your class for the rest of the day. Why don't you go home and clean up? And then he says, after that, everything was fine. He said, the teacher and I were respectful to each other, and it was great. I'm like, okay, you can't, how does that happen?
Yeah.
But they just had a different way of doing things back then. And
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But it was just,
somebody would be going to jail today.
Absolutely. And
yeah.
they really loved telling me the pranks they pulled on principals and stuff like that too. And I just got a hoot out of it. But it was great for me as a new principal at a building that I hadn't been at before to hear the history of it.
Oh yeah.
And to hear, how much these people love the building, loved their experience there. And even today, I still have people that will show up at our building to take pictures or to do things because they're just walking down memory lane.
Yeah.
Had a couple one time come in and they said they had this big camera with them, a camera person with them and everything. And they said, do you mind if we take some pictures? I was like, well, what is this for? Because I'm curious because frankly, we've had ghost hunters that have come to our school before because it's so old.
Okay.
They're like, we want to see if there's ghosts here. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want you to see if there's ghosts here.
Right.
You go away. But these people they said, well, we want to take a picture down the hallway here. 20 years ago, we met here in first grade and now we're getting married. And so we just want to say this is where it all started. And oh yeah, come on and take some pictures. But things like that, people just in this community look at Appleton and they love it. It just has such a good vibe for what they've done. And so that's why I try to take Andy Lossey's advice. Don't screw it up, Corey.
Right.
Just don't screw it up.
Yeah.
So how
old is the building?
So it's probably about 111 years now. Well, actually, the building is not itself. That's a good history question. The original building they built in 1911, and it burned down in 1955. And so when it burned down, which they think probably was arson, actually, but they didn't have all the fire suppression stuff that they have now and everything. So it was, these well-oiled, floorboards and everything. And I mean, it went up flame, but people came from miles around because they could see the flames at 1, 2 in the morning when it was burning, came around to try to save it, and they couldn't save it. It had a big bell up on the top that crashed through the floors, and it actually is now presented out in front of our school, that same bell. But interesting story from that, they had a school safe that it burned down to embers, and there's a school safe sitting out there, but it's glowing. It's so hot, it's glowing. And they were like, well, we'll come back in the morning and we'll get it. And they came back in the morning and it was gone. It had been stolen. And so they rushed to the secretary and they said, hey, what was in the safe? What did we lose, And about the week before that, they'd moved a ton of school records to I don't want to say Junction and Fruita high schools because they were actually thinking they had to move some kids. And that might be why that was burned down. They were thinking about moving kids to those schools and changing Appleton to a different leveling of school, like maybe middle school to elementary or just elementary.
Okay.
And so people were mad because they had a tradition there. They loved Appleton. That was their school. They put their money together for it. They didn't want kids moved away. Mm-hmm. And so she said, well, we only had a few kids' records in it and about $10, and I hope those guys burn their hands. And so, but there's, those kind of stories. They had built an auxiliary gym, which still stands there, and we still use for kids' programs. It was built in 1938. So part of the building is 1938. They built on another wing of the building, which is where we house our preschool, kindergarten, first, second graders.
Yeah.
That building is 1956 because they had to do something with the kids. So they built a building really fast. I've heard some of the parts of some of the additions to Fruita and Junction high schools were because they had to house all those kids that went from Appleton. So some of the building parts that are on those schools right now housed Appleton kids, and they built onto those schools.
Was it right in the middle of the school year when the?
Yeah, it was like I want to say it was February or something like that.
Okay.
So big. It was a huge deal for the Valley. It was a big deal. It had an impact on every school. All the families, it was mourning for their building that was lost, and it was a beautiful building.
Yeah.
We still have some great pictures of it, and anybody welcome to stop by Appleton. We have a good trophy case there that has some pictures of it, and just different historical kind of things. It's a really neat place.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I know that there's a lot of older schools in town, but that one has this like history aura to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's almost, if you go anywhere in town, almost anybody has some connection to it or some story, like they're connected to it.
Mm-hmm.
I heard, here's a funny anecdote. I heard Jim Davis on the broadcaster, for he does all the sports.
I'm actually going to have him on next month.
Oh, ask him about this. So I heard him talk about this. There was a lockdown one time some years ago back at Fruita, for a potential, they're worried about someone carrying a gun to school or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, times have changed. He said he went to Appleton, and he said a lockdown happened in Appleton, well, many, many, many years ago when he was a kid. And he said the reason why was because there was a guy out back right behind the playground plinking and shooting a gun, and one of the bullets ricocheted and hit the building. And kids are outside playing recess and everything. And he goes, their version of a lockdown was the teacher went, okay, guys, that guy's shooting his gun out there, and it just hit the building right by us. I think we'll go in for a while. That was a lockdown. That was as much stress as they put about it, And matter of fact, even that some of our folks that are NRA folks in the Valley, the original building there, in its cafeteria, they had an NRA, National Rifle Association club, and in the cafeteria they would move the tables away, and they had two giant metal plates that would lift up in the floorboards, and these metal plates they would hang targets on, and they would shoot .22 caliber rifles inside the building. Because it was the National Rifle Association, that was a club. And can you imagine bringing a gun into school and saying, or even trying to say, yeah, we don't want an NRA club at school where we can shoot inside the school.
Right.
I don't think it's going to happen, right?
No.
So, yeah, it's such a great history, though. It is. You go around the Valley, and there's somebody that has a story about Appleton.
Yeah.
Everybody just has, there's just a good vibe, a good connection to it, for sure.
Yeah, it's cool. Actually, you guys just did your 4th grade performance there,
Yeah.
And my son was in it, and I love going into that building.
Oh yeah, it's I would say it's not perfect by any means. I mean the HVAC system and stuff like that is 1938 and 1955, and it just doesn't do what it.
Sure.
It's hard to maintain it. We have guys come out all the time to try to keep our kids, cooler or warmer, whatever necessary. But so it has those drawbacks, but at the same time, man, we have made it function. We took the old cafeteria, which here's another great story.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the old cafeteria back in the 1930s, they said, in 1938 actually, a bunch of the farmers around the valley, this is how people can take a school and make it their own, right? So they said, you know what, we want to have a hot lunch program for our kids. And so they said, so they would have canning days here in the Grand Valley where they would, all the farmers would bring, a load of beets or carrots or potatoes or whatever, and they'd bring them in, and everybody would show up, and everybody would wash and peel them and cook them up and have these big canning parties where they would can hundreds and hundreds of cans of fruits and vegetables. And then they would bring those to the school. And then the school, its original hot lunch, you know what it cost? Can you have any idea?
Pennies, I'm sure.
Yeah, like 6 cents.
Yeah.
It was 6 cents for the original 1938, 39 hot lunch. And so we had that room is still there at Appleton, and we've turned it into a computer lab. We got some hotspot Wi-Fi spots and stuff, and got all the wiring necessary.
That's underneath, right?
That's right underneath the old gym.
Yeah.
And so we have kids going there every day, and get extra training in our computer lab. So
it's probably my son's favorite room.
Yes, and he does such a good job. I mean, he does a great job.
Yeah,
we've got a more
stuff.
modern one, and they built onto Appleton in the late 90s. They built on another wing.
Oh, okay.
So that's where the current 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are.
Oh, okay.
And so you got 1938, 1955, and 1998 or something like that, as far as building pieces that we have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much history there, man, which is... I love that stuff. I'll eat that stuff up all day.
It's so good.
One of the things that the Appleton is known for is their reading program.
Yeah.
Was that something that was already established, or was that something that you kind of brought to the table?
No, by all means, it was definitely other folks that had established that. Kind of went along with their change of mascots. I mean, they had been, like I said, they had been the Centaurs way back in the day. Then they changed to the Roadrunners. And then they changed to the Bookworms.
When was that?
That was during, I believe, Mark Schmaltz's reign as the principal there. It was a way for them to really say that everything is accessed through reading. If you want to be a great scientist, you got to be a good reader. If you want to be a great mathematician nowadays, you got to be a great reader, because you have to understand the problems. And everything is connected to that. If you can't read well, you cannot access your education very well. And so they said, we're going to focus on reading as one of our main focuses. And a principal 4 principals ago named Kathy Drogas, she was very much involved in that as well, and then Andy Lassie, he was involved in it. And for they always had high academics, always, even way back in 100 years ago. They were noted for, like, for example, their chemistry lab. They had a chemistry lab at the time that was state of the art. The community actually had put money into it. So when kids graduated from Appleton and they went on to university, they were, in their first year, made teachers' assistants because they were so astute at that. Well, we took that kind of idea, like, hey, they had all these great chemists that came out of Appleton back in the 30s and 40s and 20s and all that stuff. Well, now we wanted these great readers to come out. So what I love to hear is when our middle school principals say to me, man, we can spot an Appleton kid a mile away. One, they work so hard and they show a great deal of respect, but they're good readers. That's a huge kudo to us as a staff. We want our kids to be able to read well.
Yeah.
And just that joy that you can get from it, there's just a piece of that. So we invite our Grand Valley storytellers in, because even that verbal language storytelling correlates so well to reading. It helps them understand the elements of a story.
Yeah.
And that's what's in reading. But our staff, I certainly look for in a staff member somebody that can teach reading well, because we want to continue that tradition for sure.
Real quick story, kind of going along what you just said. So Beckham is he just turned 7 now. Gosh, it goes so fast.
Yeah.
And Dax, my 9-year-old, he's real smart kid, picked up reading really, really fast. And so in the back of my mind, I'm kind of worried, like, is his brother going to be able to read well, and progress like Dax?
Yeah.
And even at an early age, Beckham was already kind of comparing himself to his older brother. And he would even say stuff like, I don't know if I'm as smart as my older brother,
Right.
And as a parent too, I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, I want him to be as successful, know, and I don't want him to be thinking even having these thoughts. Like, you're too young to even be having these thoughts.
Right.
But Beckham's reading is exceptional.
Yeah.
And really, really good. Beckham reminds me a lot of myself growing up, but I struggled with reading. Like, even to this day, I'm still, reading is still a challenge for me.
Sure.
I'm not a fast reader whatsoever.
Yeah.
However, it's been neat to see Beckham he's doing really, really well in reading.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he always notices, and something that he even is really good at when he's reading to me,
Yeah.
is the expression.
Oh yeah.
And so as you're talking about having people come in and hearing people read, that's one thing that my son has really picked up on.
Yeah.
Is expression. And as a matter of fact, so YouTube has all kinds of great things on it, educational wise, right?
Sure.
And so there's a book that his teacher was reading to him, and I don't even know how he learned about this, but there is someone on YouTube who is reading the book.
Okay.
And so they have this really cool, like, the page, it's the actual, well, it's a digital version of the book,
Yeah.
but the pages flip over and you can see the pictures and you can see the words,
Yeah.
and the person's reading along. You don't see the person, but you can just see the page there.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I don't like this. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't like this? And he's like, oh, well, the person reading isn't giving any expression. The person reading isn't doing any characters,
Yeah.
to the voices of the characters. And he's like, my teacher does that.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. So we need to find some. So we're like flipping through trying to find,
Oh yeah.
and so that to me is a testament to exactly what you're doing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it as a parent, not only as a parent, but as a parent who is always grown up in such having an insecurity in that area.
Yeah.
And so it is such a relief to see my boys
Yeah.
reading well, and it is because of the program that you guys have there.
Well, it's super multifaceted, and obviously it has to have parent, a positive disposition towards it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kudos to you guys, because you have made it important to him to be able to read well. It's like you celebrate when he is doing that, when he's telling you about that expression, you're giving him attention, and that means this is important,
Yeah.
right? Good job, man. I love hearing this. That's so important. So we got families that do that.
Mm-hmm.
Then we bring in all these other pieces, like our PTA runs a great summer reading program. I'd say it's incredible. It's done and it's worked through the Mesa County Library System, and man, we have hundreds of kids that go through that, and they read thousands and thousands and thousands of pages over the summer. And you think all of that matters, It just keeps all of those pieces where they have storytellers come in, the teachers that do a great job, and they stay focused on all the minute details, that allows kids to access, like the phonics and those kind of pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, you got the expression and the story and all of those pieces that come in, and you make kids into readers that love it, and then it works for itself. Then it kind of just, like, the momentum gets going, and it just is what it is. So
it is so nice to, all I have to do is say, hey, you guys got to get your reading homework done. Go do it.
yeah,
And they just go do it.
yeah,
And we have them try to read for like 15-20 minutes every day,
Right.
which I think is what the teachers are
Pretty
asking.
standard,
Yeah.
yeah,
And and
That's good.
not necessarily Beck so much, well, because of the books that Beck's reading,
Yeah.
because of the level, but
yeah.
he can fly, well, I guess I'm bragging on him a little bit,
Do
but
it.
but he
It's good.
he'll get through these thin little storybooks,
Right.
and then he's done, and then he wants to go do what he wants to do,
Yeah.
but it's really neat to see Dax. He gets lost in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so
that's when you know
he's
you've
reading
got him
for
hooked.
yeah,
That's
he's
when
reading
you
for
hooked him
40 minutes, and
Right.
um,
Well, one of the things, they walk into our building, 4 principals ago, and the PTA that was supportive, they bought this big statue. And right in our foyer of our building
Yeah.
is a statue of a bronze statue. It's probably about 5 feet high, of a boy sitting on a stack of books, and he's just engrossed into it. And it's called The Reader.
that
And
was donated to the school.
that was actually purchased by that principal, Kathy
Oh,
Drogas.
okay.
She purchased half of it, and PTA purchased half of it. It was
Okay.
like $16,000.
I was gonna say, yeah,
Back in the day, that was a lot. But that's
it's still a lot, really.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was the focus, though. They wanted everybody in the building to know a couple things. One, that reading was super important. That was who we were. And then also, though, art. They wanted an art representation that showed that our school also appreciated those elements too. Like we've never got rid of, music or PE or art. Those kind of things are super important for the global education of a kid. And, you might find, we just had an art night the other night where we had several hundred, families show up and go through multiple different kinds of fun art activities and things like that. We want to always have those things. We have a vibrant art heritage group. We have actual professional artists that we pay to come in and help out occasionally with kids. And it's that combination of, all these things matter.
Yeah.
But even that statue says, hey, reading and art are still really important here.
Yeah.
And every kid walks by that, that trope or that statue every day, and they can say, I'm a bookworm, just like that kid. Because it's actually the silhouette of it has been our, kind of our mascot for years and years and years. So, reading's super important, and it's, you got to have it. I mean, in this world, even as much digital as we go, what is everything you're doing on your phone besides watching a video? You're reading something. You're reading a lot. Yeah. There is that visual piece or that auditory piece, but there's a lot of reading that is involved. And if you can read and discern very well, I think about even for, this is a deeper kind of level, but you think about our whole society as far as being able to make literate kids or adults then that can wade through all of the information that's bombarding them and see what's important. Like it might be for a political candidate or something like that. Can they read past just the slogan? Whatever side you're on, every side has a slogan. But can you read behind that to see what is this person about, right? We want kids to be able to discern that, not just get trapped into the 3-word slogan, be able to read into further and be able to make up good decisions on their own because they have access to reading.
Yeah. You guys are nailing it. I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
And it's really, really cool.
It's a lot of fun. And that's so when I was first teaching, I was a first grade, second grade teacher. And one of the most rewarding things to me was seeing a kid grow in their reading. It was, especially at that level, it is so remarkable. It's almost a miracle. It is just so rewarding to teachers. And so whenever teachers start, wearing out or something like that, I point them back to student growth. Because when they see a kid growing, that is rewarding for them. That's rewarding for the kid, for the parents. It turns everything into a positive. So if you just keep growing, and in reading, you can see it. You can literally see how they're going from these little tiny primers where they, it's 3-word with a vowel in the middle kind of words, cat. Yeah. And then they're moving on to bigger and better things. And you're just going, wow, this is incredible.
My son loves it when he goes to the next level of book.
Reading level,
Yeah, because I think he's on, I don't even know what he's on right now, M or something like that. But he's challenging himself in reading. That is awesome.
It is.
Like if you can get a kid to start challenging himself and seeing goals to meet in reading. Yeah. I mean, sports and stuff is relatively easy. Yeah. Especially because they see athletes all over the place, right? It's super easy to inspire to be an athlete. Yeah. But to aspire to be a reader, right? Yeah. It's really almost non-existent other than what the teachers are doing, right?
Right. You're right. I mean, it's really hard to find, I guess it's this simple though. If they love their teacher, and they'll want to emulate what she or he does, and they'll want to see what they value. And if the teacher values reading and they've created a relationship with the kids, then that relationship makes that kid go, oh, I want to please this person. I want to read too. I want to be more like them. Yeah. Same thing with anything with how we raise our kids. If you're a hunter and you bring your kid out in the forest with you to teach them hunting skills and being a woodsman, those kids, they aspire to that because they see, and then it picks up its own momentum at some point. They don't need that. They'll go off and hunt by themselves someday, right? And so same with a reader. They need someone right there with them at first, to read that nursery rhyme or read something to them that is fun, and maybe use little voices or something, whatever. But they get engaged, and then they start to read and they pick up on it themselves, and then it becomes almost, it's going to sound funny, but it sounds addictive. They start to want that next level. They want to get into those books that are thicker or better or more themes that are deeper,
Yeah.
And so, the love of reading is something we want to promote at Appleton over and over and over.
It's so cool, man. Like sitting there reading with my kid, and we'll say right when we start, I'll say, okay, we're going to read to chapter 7.
Yeah.
And we get to the chapter 7, and he's like, well, I want to know what's going on in the story, so I want to keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And which is the total opposite of me growing up. It was like, I'm reading chapter 7 and I am done.
Yeah.
I didn't even care what it was, just words on paper, man.
Sure.
But I mean, that's just part of my upbringing too. Like we had a pretty rough upbringing,
Sure.
and so life's different. And I do think that parents' involvement is super, super important too. Let's dive into that. Let's dive into parent involvement, man.
Sure.
Like what do you see as, I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to be negative or anything like that, but there's a big difference between a student whose parents are super, super involved, and a student that's not. But, I will say that the parent involvement at Appleton, you got to see it. I mean, I'm sure you see it all the time, not only with the PT, but like, just the success of the kids and the growth of the kids. Like, it's super important.
Without a doubt. I never let, it's going to sound weird, but I never let teachers off the hook in that we have your kids 7 hours a day. And so we have a major responsibility in that. They have to be, on. Mm-hmm. But then also we're going to do everything we can to encourage people, to the parents and the families, to support their kids in this too. Because if they value it, the kid will value it. It's like I've talked to parents before about, what you say to a kid when they first go home, what it will have a major impact on them. So when the kid goes home, and if the very first thing you say is, did anything bad happen today? Mm-hmm. Well, what does that kid think you want to hear? Something bad that happened today.
Holy cow, dude! You're speaking straight to me right now. So keep going.
Were you bullied today? Was your teacher mean to you today? Was it like this negative kind of connotation? And I've actually tried to flip some people's narrative with their kids before, and by saying, "Hey, tell me something good that happened today. Mm-hmm. Tell me something good." And it's oftentimes the mama bear, papa bear in us, that comes out when we hear a kid say something like, there was bullying today at school or something like that. Well, we're fully invested because we want to protect our kids. So we're giving them eye contact. We're listening to every word they say. Yeah. And that kid sees that, wow, my parents give me a lot of attention when they're hearing something negative, right? And you think about YouTube or any kind of social media thing now, where the negative actually draws our attention. I mean, they have the algorithms and things that help draw that, but we have to switch that narrative as a parent. As a parent, we need to be able to say to our kid, tell me something good that happened today. Yeah. And then give them the attention that they would have got if they had said something, negative that had happened. If they say, yeah, I worked on this project and, oh, whatever, okay, good, I ain't gonna get time. No. You got to stay with them for that program, for whatever that sentence is or two, and let them tell you, like, here's what happened today. This is what was good, Mom. Oh, my teacher was funny, and this happened, or out on the playground, we had a great time on the bars, and you're like, okay, bars, I got to go mix dinner and stuff.
It's so hard.
You got to listen to it. If you listen to it for a little bit, school becomes important. The positive pieces of it become important, and then just making sure that your kid hears that, because, man, nobody is more influential than a parent in a kid's life. Mm-hmm. Nobody. Yeah. And I mean, not even teachers. Teachers get them with 7 hours a day, and they're still not as influential. They're very influential, but they're not as influential. That parent will guide that kid one way or the other. Yeah. Now, some of our folks are challenged, with different kinds of atmospheres and kids and stuff. So we try to pull in the gaps if we can, if a kid just, never gets to see mom and dad, or their mom and dad are in jail or something like that, or and they're being raised by grandparents or things like that. Those things are real situations, and we try to surround a kid and become a surrogate family for them that helps them get there, But in general, our families do a great job at Appleton of really helping kids see the positive and then promoting their learning. Just like it's all about, I tell our staff this all the time, it's all about growth. Growth is so rewarding. When you plant a garden and you see it growing, I mean, it's fun. It's fun to see the crop start going, I one time I heard some statistics on some different kind of jobs that people do, like carpenter. And this is an old survey, way years ago, but carpenter and, like farmers and things like that. And they found that they had a really low incidence of suicide and some of these kinds of things and they attributed it to seeing steady growth. They saw something happening for their labor, and so I think that's what you got to promote with the kids. If you're a parent, is something is happening with your labor. All this work isn't going for naught, man. This is good job, well done. And like I just even love our music programs. You mentioned that the other night.
Yeah,
we had 400 people, I think, at our music program celebrating the kids. They've worked hard to sing these songs and everything. Yeah. And you know what? Those kids just adored that attention. They loved it, and they performed better for it.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what you do with reading or math. You just adore them for their effort. And then as they grow, you point it out. Man, I remember they're a fourth grader and they're struggling. They're complaining to you about the math so hard or something. And you say, yeah, but I remember when you were in first grade and it was hard to add 10 plus 10. That was really hard for you back then. Look where you are now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have grown a lot, and even calling that growth out, and saying you were here and now you're here. So that's important, I think, helping a kid see that.
I will say this too about Appleton and just the job that you guys are doing there. As a parent, that parent involvement is embedded in the culture. Yeah. Like I felt that when Dax first started going to Appleton. Yeah. First of all, I got to tell you too that like Danielle, my wife, she was seeking out Appleton. Yeah. Well, I guess let me step back and then I'll move into that. Like, I know for a fact that people are making the biggest financial investment of their life for their kids to go to school. They're buying homes in the Appleton area. That's the biggest financial investment of people's lives. Yeah. And they're doing it so that they can try to get into that culture. And that's huge,
And I give a ton of credit to, the tradition that's been there for so long. People do that all the time. And I have people, it's unfortunate, but like our school is growing tremendously. You talk about the valley and the shift of where people are moving in the valley and that kind of stuff. There are about 7 different home areas being built in Appleton's.
Right next door, man. Yeah.
And so we're at about, I started there 11 years ago, and we were around 320 kids. We're at 450 now, and the projection is to go higher. For the last several years now, when I first got there, I accepted dozens and dozens and dozens of school of choice kids, families that said, for that reason, they maybe didn't live in that area, but they wanted to have they were willing to drive their kid across town to go to Appleton. And so I was able to accept a lot of those back then when we had room. But we have filled up. Yeah. And so now for the last several years now, I have been unable to accept very many school of choice. There's a few here and there. If we have a low one grade level, might work, but for their sibling, it may not work. And that's a tough thing to tell a parent, like I can accept one kid, but I can't accept the other. And
oh, that's tough.
It's really hard. Yeah. And people make a lot of sacrifices to go there. Like you said, they are willing to buy a home in the area just so they can come and have their kids have that experience there. And that's kudos to our staff and to them, to the other families that have helped. Because I look at our PTA and how vibrant they are, and that's people stepping out into the school and helping, and being just so great. And you've done such a good job with that. And I appreciate your, all of your camera stuff and everything, because we've done some great films there.
Yeah.
Where we've supported like the summer reading programs and things like that, and the kids just love it. Well, but it took you to the effort. I mean, this is your business. This is what you do.
Right.
And taking any of that time is, that's your time. That's really important. But yet you pour that time into the school. And I would say, like, honestly, parents, it's always funny to me, and this is a little political piece, but how many people are willing to have a political idea about what they think about a school, public school, and they've never stepped foot in one. They've never went in and helped out. They've never went in and volunteered in the PTA or at some event and to see what it's really about. Because I think they would find that there's just a lot of the same kind of people that are in your community are the teachers there. The same kind of people that are in your community are the people that are trying to bring your kid up and teach them how to be thoughtful thinkers and be able to, make good decisions and give them a great shot at life. But man, it works so much better if parents help out. And you're right. We do have a great group of families that families help out at Appleton all the time. And it is part of the culture. The first, I tell principals out there, one of the biggest things you can do is go into the kindergarten. I try to do that every year. Right when the parents are there for the very first meet your teacher kind of event, I go in and I say, look, you have an opportunity to change your kid's life for 6 years here, kindergarten through 5th grade. All you got to do is be a part of it. Just show up at events, be a part of it, encourage your kids, help out with PTA every once in a while, not even all the time, just every once in a while, help out, and all of that makes such a big difference, and luckily we have such a great atmosphere there. I think parents feel welcome to do that. And it builds on itself. When I look at the success of Appleton, it's because, the staff and the families are working together, and it just builds and it just gets this momentum, and it's wonderful. It's great.
Absolutely. And that leads into the second part of what I was wanting to say is the culture there with it has, I actually feel an accountability as a parent. Like I feel, and it's not a pressure. It's a positive thing, right?
It's just what happens there.
But I guess that is what accountability is. It's not. It's bringing responsibility to where responsibility needs to be.
Yeah.
And I felt that from day one.
Yeah.
And even now still. And so the culture has brought an accountability to me as a parent to be involved in my kids' schooling. And I think, Danielle and I, we parent real well together. And so I think that's the driving force of it. But I feel it, man.
Yeah.
I feel that accountability, and that's the culture that's there. And I can see it in other parents too.
Sure.
And so I know that it's not just, what me and Danielle pride ourselves in as parents, because I see it in so many other parents as well.
I know it's hard because everybody is so busy. One thing that's unique about Appleton is it's probably the most socioeconomically diverse school in the Valley. People don't realize that, but we have about 35% of our kids that are on free and reduced lunch rate, which is a symbol of maybe some level of poverty in some way. We have kids currently that live literally right now in the desert in a trailer, things like that. We have kids that live in the hotels, we have that kind of stuff. And then we have a middle income class that is there as well. And then we have folks that have $1 million homes out north, and acreage and stuff. And so you have all of these diverse groups meeting, but there is a place for all of them, for all of their parents to bring in whatever they can bring in. And truly, this is a pride thing. I'll just speak it, but I'm prideful because we have families from that 30 to 35% that are in our building helping out, volunteering, even though life is really hard for them.
Sure.
Life's really hard. But we also have the middle income folks who are incredibly busy. Both parents are chasing 2 kids or 3 kids or 4 kids after school events and ballet this and, and football that and soccer this. And and yet they show up at events and they help out, that one or the other. They make it happen. They get grandma involved. They do whatever they can to help out at the classroom parties. I mean, all of that matters. And then the folks on the wealthier side, sometimes we're going to them and we're saying, if we just had the ability to purchase 5 more computers or something like that,
Sure.
and they pony up and they help us. And it doesn't mean we just need their money, because they actually spend time in the building too. They don't just get a pass because they do that. Everybody being a part of that, that's what I think maybe that's the enduring message of Appleton, is that it is a community. It really is. And it has been for 111 years.
Yeah.
It has been a community. They used to, Troy, one of the cool things we made in our 100-year thing was a cookbook. We made this cookbook, and it has all these little anecdotal stories in it, along with these recipes. Well, when I'm going through it, when I first got to Appleton, one of the stories in there, or one of the recipes, is for like these biscuits, and they're like 100 pounds of flour. I'm like, who's making 100 pounds of flour of biscuits? What is that?
Right.
Well, the story behind that was that Appleton once a month would have this morning breakfast that the whole community, I'm talking Pomona, Appleton, Loma, all of these communities that were supporting Appleton, would drive their wagons, literally drive their wagons and their Model T Fords and whatever they had and their horses, and they would drive them to Appleton in the morning, the whole community, and they would eat these biscuits that were, as big as cats' heads, they said, and all this stuff. They would have a big biscuit day in the morning. That was big gravy, biscuits and gravy kind of morning.
Yeah.
And that was part of the community. Like, everybody was like, no, we got to be there for that. Not just because we're getting food, but because that was the way for everybody to intermingle and have a connection.
Yeah.
And so I think that is something that we're not just churning out kids that are readers and stuff. We want them to want to come back to Appleton. It is funny how many middle school and high school kids who have left us, who moved on, and they come back to volunteer. The kids do.
Oh, wow.
And they say, oh, I had such a great experience here and I wanted to be here. We have all these, at our art night the other night, we had about 20-something kids that are in middle school or high school that came back to volunteer. Why do they do that?
Wow.
It's not because they owe us anything, and
Sure.
or they come back because they want to. They want to be connected with it, and it's that sense of community that if you can build that, then you got something, right? And so I think that's been there for a long time, and we just want to keep that going. That's Andy Lossey's words.
Don't screw it up.
Don't mess it up, Hafey. That's
Yeah.
what I don't want to mess up. So
Right.
we also look at reaching out and giving back. And I talk to our staff about Appleton influence all the time. We want our staff to be a part of not just our Appleton community, but the District 51 community. Like, where can we serve on committees? Like right now, we've got different teachers that are serving on the curriculum committee that's going to pick the new reading resources for the whole school district. That impacts everybody's kids in this whole valley.
Right.
So we've got people on that are experts in that, and they're going to be supporting that. Some years ago, we had a school from Craig that contacted us, and they said, hey, Sunset Elementary, they said, hey, we heard you guys do a great job of melding your writing and your computer together. Kind of like, how do you get the kids to type a bunch and write well and do this stuff? So we brought their staff into our school to watch our staff do their thing for a whole day. And then they went back and took some of our ideas and implanted them into their school. The next year, they had put those in place. They were the #1 growth school in the all of Colorado in writing. #1.
Wow.
And so in their newspaper up there, Craig Daily Press, they said, and a trip to Appleton Elementary made all the difference in the world, and
Sure.
that's our Appleton influence. That's us, okay, we have this great community, and it could be just in our own building, but no, we want it to be in the valley. We want it to be even regional, go beyond our doors and help everybody if we can.
Yeah.
But makes everybody a part of us,
Yeah. I think the community aspect is super important, especially in a society where, man, that gets tougher and tougher and tougher,
Yeah.
So easy to stay at home.
Yeah.
So easy to have everything that you need within the
Yes.
walls of your home.
Right.
But
Yeah, it's
community
easy.
is
It's easy to cast stones. I'll say this: it's easy to cast stones when you don't know. when you don't know about a program or somebody or something like that.
Yeah.
But oftentimes when we meet that person or we go to that program or go to that school,
Yeah.
we find out, oh, there's a lot of good happening here. You know, this is,
Yeah.
you know, the narrative actually maybe I thought isn't the whole truth, you know, and I find out something positive about it. And then I want to be attached to it. And then I'm like, oh, now I'm part of the good that's building here. So I would encourage anybody, whatever school you go to, be a part of it.
Yeah.
Be a part of it. You only get, you know, it's different when kids get to middle and high school. You can still be a part of it, no doubt about it. And they would say, I'm sure those schools would say that. But in elementary, it's something unique because there are littles, right? And you only get that 5-6 year window to make that kind of a difference right there. So I'd encourage everybody who's going to be a kindergarten mom or dad, start planning. I've got a 6-year devotion to that school, whatever that is, where I'm going to help out somewhere, sometime, you know, with that program.
Dude, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for your time, man.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming in on spring break.
It's lovely, man. It's great.
And this is a much deserved week off for you, and you came in to do that. So I really, really appreciate that. And
well, Troy, I appreciate that you give us a voice and you know, you're helping to be the positive influence that we need for education. I am a firm believer that the United States of America, I mean, it's this deep. If our education system goes under, then we're done.
Yeah.
We don't, you know, we don't exist anymore. We have to have people that are willing to serve like you are, putting your resources into this and giving the message that, hey, there are good things going on.
Yeah.
And we can support those good things. And so I'm just passionate about that we have a good thing going on, people that are wonderful like you that are helping us out. I'm surrounded by great people at Appleton that won't let me mess it up. So
yeah, you've got a great staff, man.
I do.
Yeah.
Man, gosh, they are passionate. They're awesome.
Yeah.
I love them. They're just absolutely incredible people.
And I mean, it's one of the hardest jobs, you know, that people can do. And the culture there, it's great. I know it's not easy, right?
Yeah, right.
It's a tough job, and like you said, the diversity of kids that you're dealing with is challenging, but the consistency that you guys bring, I think, is probably one of the biggest successes to kind of melting away that diversity, right?
Yeah.
Like if you guys are consistent, which you are, that diversity kind of just melts away, and it's really, really cool.
Every kid can grow, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the thing we just hang our hats on right there. They might not all come to us with the same background or the same set of circumstances that allow them to be successful by some definition, but everybody can grow. And so if we keep growing them, they will reach a level of success. They will. So it's about growth.
Thanks again, man.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Troy.
it.
Appreciate you.
This was
Appreciate
fun.
your family.
Thank you.
You guys are great.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.